Hi, good afternoon. It's afternoon here. You could be watching this at any time, but at any rate, I've got to say some greeting, so maybe just hello. So in this video, I'm going to cover the new programming concepts that are covered in Chapter 3 of your text. I'm going to do this by writing from scratch, almost from scratch, a couple of classes in which I will write some code that I hope will illustrate these new concepts. So I have two classes created here. They're pretty much empty, as I'll show you in just a second. Club, and this would be like a school club, like the computer club. And this class would be members of a club. Okay? So let's start with club and take a look at the code for club. Now, public class club, and this is where we would normally define fields. So let's, for the heck of it, put a field here called string, and we'll call this field club name. And this club is just going to have a couple of members. And this is going to be a little bit different here, because what I'm going to do is write member, and then I'll do member 1, and I'll just do this member 1, member 2. And let me do an integer variable here, just for the heck of it, because it illustrates a point that's important. You know what? Well, I'll do an int, and we'll just call this number of members, and we'll have a Boolean, which is this is a active club or not. Okay. Oops. Club. So there are two different types of variables here. The ones that are highlighted in red are known as primitive variables. It simply means that they are, perhaps a better word than primitive would be that they point to simple data. So an integer is a number, very simple, straightforward. A Boolean is a true-false value, which is stored in the computer as just a single bit of information, which is either true or false. These, on the other hand, a string is an object in Java, defined as a bunch of characters, or any characters, spaces, numbers. These are all characters, exclamation points. Any set of characters between two quotation marks is a string in Java. But strings in Java are objects, so that they are not simple or primitive in the way that integers or Booleans are. Now, member is, if we look back here, member is this class that we're defining in just a second, which will define some of the characteristics of a member of a club. So member is a class, and when we make objects of this class, they'll be member objects. So going back to here, we've defined a variable type member that will basically refer to objects of the member class. Okay, they're not primitive. A member object could be quite complex, unlike an integer or a Boolean. So it's a slightly different approach to using variables than we've used up to this time. Okay? So in the constructor for this class, public club, we're going to not pass in any parameters. And in here we're going to say member1 equals new member. So what actually happens at that point is when this code is executed by the Java virtual machine is that a new member object is created. That's what that does. And a reference to that object is stored in this variable in member1. And we can do the same thing for member2. These will not actually show up when you create objects like this within a Java program. Instead of right-clicking on a class, a compiled class, and doing new object. Those objects, when you do it out here manually, they show up down here on the object doc. When you make objects within a Java class, those objects don't show up on the object doc. You can inspect them with the inspector, but then there's no visual representation of them in this window. Okay. Let's set int equal to int. Set number of members equal to 2 because we've created 2 new members, and we'll set active club, our Boolean variable, equal to true. True. Okay, good. So that's our constructor. Good enough for now. Now we could overload this constructor. This is another concept in the chapter. Any method can be overloaded. All that means is that it uses the same method name. In this case, it's another constructor, but it has a different parameter list. Now there are no parameters to this club constructor, but in this club constructor, say we passed in an integer value. Let's say we passed in a Boolean value called club is active. And in here, inside the method, instead of saying active club equals true, we say active club equals club is active. So if we called this constructor, and we would call that constructor by supplying a Boolean value as a parameter, that's what would call this constructor. If we called club and we didn't supply any constructor, or sorry, if we made a new object of type club and we didn't supply anything as a value to it, then that would call this constructor. If we supplied a Boolean parameter, this constructor would be called. So you can sort of think of the parameter list as determining which of the methods is called. And this is called overloading. And this can be done with any method in Java. You could have accessor methods, mutator methods, and constructors, all of which have the same, of each type that have the same name, as long as they have different sets of parameters. Java doesn't have any problem with that, and the one that's actually used is determined by the parameters that are supplied when the method is called. Okay? So that's good enough for now on club. See if that compiles. Oh, missing one brace here at the end. Should compile now. Good. Compile. Okay, let's go over and look at this member class, of which we're making new ones back in club. Okay, so the member class, well, a club member would have a name, so let's make string, and we'll call this member name. Makes sense, right? And we could store all kinds of things about members, but for our purposes, to keep things simple, let's just leave it at that. Right? But we could store, whether they're an officer of the club, how long they've been in the club, whether things that they've done for the club. Any number of things could be stored. So now let's make the constructor for this public member, and we'll make this a constructor that has no parameters. Remember, we could make another constructor that has parameters. We could make lots of different constructors as long as they have different parameter lists. Okay, and in this, actually let's just make, well, we'll leave it like this. And in this we will say member name equals the empty string. Right? So this is a legitimate string. A string with nothing between the two quotation marks is a legitimate string in Java. It's called the empty string, and you can make a string object equal to the empty string. So that's all this constructor is going to do. Not very interesting at all. But let's make an accessor method for this. Let's make a mutator method. So public void, and all this mutator method is going to do is change the member name to change name. We'll take in a string, new name, and you know what this is going to do. This is going to, we're going to say member name equals new name. That's it. Mutates a field with a value supplied in the parameter. And let's also make an accessor method, public string get name, no parameter needed, and this simply returns member name. Okay, returns the field when it's called. Okay, so that looks good. I think we need one more brace there, and we can compile that. And these are both compiled. And we can come back here. Oh, let's compile that. And we can make a new club. We use the default constructor, club1. And let's inspect that. So this is a little confusing here. Let's take a look at what's going on here. Club name is string, club name is null. That's because we didn't set it. And what's this arrow here? There are two of them. These are arrows that point to member objects named member1 and member2. Now, if you remember, right, those are created in both constructors of club, but here in the default constructor, we're making a new member object here called member1, another new member object here called member2. And the arrow is BlueJay's way of saying that the variable, right, these white boxes always represent variables in BlueJay. The variable contains a pointer to the actual object, the member object called member1. If I want to see that object, I can click here, and there's only one field in the member object. It's the member name, and there it is, having the empty string, which is what we the default constructor sets it to. Here's the other one, and that's again empty string. Okay, no surprises there. Number of members is 2, and this is an active club. It's true. These are all set here in the default constructor, which we called. Good. Okay. So let's come back here, and let's actually call oh, can we do this from here? Interesting. Well, let's do it manually. Let's see. This is actually interesting because this is exactly what's going on here. Right? The objects of member that were created by club are not down here on the doc, so I can't call their methods. Like if I made a new member here, it would appear down on the doc, And I could actually call its change name method and supply a new name. And I'll say Samantha. And then I could call its getName method and have Samantha return to me, right? But the clubs that were created in here automatically by the code, and here, these member 1 and member 2, don't confuse this member 1 with the member 1 that I created manually by making a new object here. Member 1 and member 2, the only way to get to them is from the object, the club object that I create when I make a new object of type club. So let's think about that and add a method in here that would actually change one of the names of the club members. So we'll call this method, you know what, I'm going to, for now, just to keep things tight, I'm going to erase this second accessor, this second, not an accessor method, this second constructor. And we're going to make a mutator method here. It's going to, well, it's not actually a mutator method. We're going to write a method that will call the mutator method of one of the member objects. So we'll call this public make change to member. And this will have passed into it a name, a string, and we'll pass into it name. And what are we going to do here? Well, we're going to add, we'll just, right now we're just going to change member 1's name. So we write the name of the object that we want to deal with, member 1. Now, notice the dot, right? The dot says the object is member 1, and I want to use a part of that object. I want to use the particular method in that object. In this case, I'm going to use the mutator method for member 1 that will allow me to change the name that's stored in that object's field member name. So this is change name, sorry. Leave that open. So member 1 dot change name. This is calling, right, that method, and this method needs a string. So we're going to pass the same string right on along into that object. Okay. Let's get rid of that. Now this is not very. Maybe we should call this make change to member 1 because that's all we can do at this point. But let's compile that. Let's see, invalid method declaration, return type. Oh, we didn't specify a return type. This is a void method. So cool. And missing semicolon, I hate that. And now we're good. Okay, so let's go back here, make another new club, and let's call that, let's first inspect, right? So here's member 1's reference, and member 1 of our club still doesn't have a name. It's the empty string, okay? So now we're going to call that method make change to member 1. And that requires a name, so we'll pass in Billy. Say OK. And let's go see if that change was made. Go to the inspector, and that's member 1 we're interested in. And again, remember this just says, okay, this is a pointer to an object. And let's go see. Oh, we did successfully change that object's field member name to Billy. Okay? So what you see here is an example of one class, right, making objects of another class And then using those objects, in this case, we're just changing the name of that member, but making use of those objects to do whatever it is supposed to do. And if we develop this program, the club class would be able to add members and delete members from the club. You do have various other things that you need to do regarding maintaining the data about a club. Okay? So, there's just one other thing I want to cover. This is an external data method call, an external method call. Right? Whenever you have the name of an object, oops, this is an object, and then the dot notation, and then a method, you're calling a method in another object. You can also call a method in, a method can, you can call a method from within a class, and that's called an internal method call. So I could, for instance, within this class, before getting the name, I could call change name. And I could pass in a string. Pass in Sally. There wouldn't be much point of writing code like this other than just to illustrate a point, and that's all we're doing here. But you'll notice this is an internal method call. Right? We're calling a method that's part of the class. So from one method, you're calling another method. There's no dot notation. All you need to do is write the name of the method and any parameters that are required. In this case, change name requires a string. Okay, so that's an internal method call, calling a method in the same class. This is an external method call where you have to say what's the object that contains the method, and then within that object, after the dot, write the name of the method. Right? So those are the major new things covered in Chapter 3. There are a few other things like the debugger and the use of this. I guess let's just quickly cover the use of this. I'm not going to cover the debugger in this, but I think this is a good time to cover this. So let's say we have let's go over to member. We have a field called member name. We have a mutator method called change name, which takes in a string. Now let's say for whatever reason we wanted to use member name as the name of the parameter. And if you look at this is not going to look right. Member name here. As we've covered, I think I've covered earlier. I forget sometimes what exactly I've covered in these previous videos, but I'm pretty sure I've covered this. If not, if so, this is review. If not, well, there's no better time than right now. Parameters override within a method fields. So within this method, any reference to the word member name is really a reference to this parameter and not to this field up here. Right? So we could change member name here and have no impact on this because they're two different things. Even though the name looks the same, the location and the fact that this is a parameter means that this is actually a local variable called member name, unrelated, other than the fact that it has the same name, to the field up here. Now, you can get away with this by using the keyword this, and then a dot. And this in Java always refers to the object that contains the code. Right? So when you've made an object of member, this is think of this as a special variable that always points to the object that contains the word this. So it's it's pointing to itself. It's saying me. So when you do this, it knows to use the field here, and this will actually cause the field to be changed. Since you don't have the word this over here, this is referring to this parameter which is local to the variable. So if you like to use the same name in both places, you can. You just have to use the this keyword, then a dot, right? Because this refers to an object. It's a reference to an object. Whenever you're referring to something in an object, a field or a method, right, in another object or in this object, then you need to use the dot notation. Okay? So that was a lot of material covered pretty quickly. So you may need to make sure you do the exercises. You may need to watch this a couple of times. But that does cover the major elements in Chapter 3, except for the debugger. So long for now.